Starting over in your 30s can be an incredibly exciting time. And today I'm going to share with you some of the things that I've learned from my own personal experience in work, in life, and in love. Now, if you are new here, my name is Shasta May Hernandez, pronouns they, them, their, and I am your soul alignment guide, here to help you leaders in aligning your values, your goals, and your soul with your life, your love, and your work. Now, today, we're going to talk about specifically starting over in your 30s and some of the things that can impact you in 3 different areas of your work, of some general life lessons that have been learned, and in love. Now, my story particularly has many starts and many endings, and I have also, because of the work that I do, have taken a particular interest in how to start things, how to end things, how to move through transitions. This is my life's work. And so some of what I will offer may be very nuanced because I pay very close attention to these details, and they are what lights me up. And I take great interest and curiosity in not only how I have moved through these things, but also in how others have as well. And I also want to note that a lot of these are also very specific to my situation or situations, because I have started and ended so many things, and I have moved through great transition quite a bit all at one time in various stages of my life. So it might be quite specific, but also I hope to offer some general things that I have learned that might help you if you are considering starting over in any area of your work, your life, or love. Now, to start with work, I was in a career that I did enjoy many pieces of, and I found myself moving up the ranks, and things kind of fell together quite naturally over the years after I graduated college. And I was enjoying myself in many areas and aspects of the career, though I did find I reached a point where I had to sit with myself in my mental health, my emotional health realm, my physical health realm, and also my morals and my values and what I really stood for. And I came to a place where the office politics were not really in alignment with those 2 areas of my life. And I took a really big leap and decided to leave my career to start my own business. Now, the way I navigated this, and something that I often will recommend to folks, is I started my business and started running things before I left my career, which on top of all the other things I was going through in my life was quite a lot. So I highly recommend, especially if you're looking to start your own business, really sitting with this, counseling with yourself, with your guides, with somebody about this. I did have folks that I could turn to at my old career for some advice, for some tips, just as sounding boards. I also had a therapist. I did have other friends and folks that I could turn to really ask about some of the things that I was struggling with in terms of ending that career and the implications of what that would mean, not only in my future if I decided to stay in that field, which I did not, though also what it might mean in terms of my reputation that I had built and transitioning to doing one-on-one client work, which is what I was doing previously in the health coaching and wellness realm. Now, I will also say, depending on the reasons why you may be choosing to end a career and or start, if you're going to start in a new place and leave that area that you're in, I highly recommend, even if it's just a job change or a company switch, being very mindful about who you tell and when you mention this. Professionally, I think it has been, or traditionally, it has been known that 2 weeks is the courtesy that you give. I did something very different because I very deeply cared about the work that I had been doing and what I had grown. And I also wanted to leave the place that did take care of me in many ways with something that I felt could leave at least a good note for them on my way out. I helped them find a candidate to replace me, and I actually found great joy in doing that. That was something that filled my soul and my heart and made me feel good about leaving the way that I did. And I also gave 1 month's notice to the entire staff in order to help them recruit somebody new. I did tell my direct boss and my counterpart at the time, who I was working with, I told both of them much sooner so that we could come up with a game plan and work together on the transition. Now, working up to the date of leaving, that was such an experience for me because I was not planning on that. That was not a part of my 5-10-year plan. But it was something that I found as the days grew closer to that. I really felt so much closure, and I was finding that quite naturally I was looking for places and spaces to either close out certain relationships or see how we could transition those relationships, if any of them were worth salvaging or transitioning with me into the next phase of my life and career. Also, you want to think about the financial implications of leaving. What, if you have things invested in terms of a stake in whatever place you're in, if you have retirement funds, your medical and your health insurance, all those kinds of things, how they will transition. And especially if you're looking to become an entrepreneur, these are things you will have to think about in your own business eventually, and things that you will most likely not have initially. So you really want to think about what that means and how you're going to be able to transition. This transition for me, in some ways, although it was not a part of my main plan over 10 years, it was something in the future that I had been looking into starting my own thing. So I had already had in the back of my mind some ideas flowing about how I might be able to support myself moving forward. Though after I left and was fully in my other business, life really changed for me in so many ways. So really considering the financial implications, really considering all the support that you have around you and who will be able to support you through the transition and who you can connect with and stay connected to as you come out on the other side, whether it's a job change, whether it's a complete career change. And even if you're considering something like retiring early, I know many folks are having the privilege of being able to retire quite young. And this is also a big life change and stage, and something that does need to be honored. So if this is something that's quite happy for you and a celebratory thing, I highly encourage celebrating it in some way, marking the occasion, the exact date that you left. I had little things that I did for myself to really mark that time in my life because it felt like a really big step and a leap that I took of faith, not only in myself, but in my idea of moving forward in my own life. In terms of life, there are a couple of things that I transitioned through in my life that did actually begin in my 20s, but I went through them into my 30s. Spiritually, there's something called the Saturn return that often people will go through around the age of 27, and that could take you into your 30s potentially, depending on how long it takes you to move through that. And around that time, a lot of different changes and things can happen in your life, which did for me. But some of them started quite earlier in my 20s when I came out as queer to myself. And then in my 30s, I came out as non-binary to my parents. And this was a particularly big change and shift, only really because I still cared very deeply about what my parents thought. And also, I grew up in a religious home, so it was quite a big deal for me to not only keep that secret from them. I was out in other areas of my life and celebrating that and just having a wonderful time, but with not being out to my parents, it was a significant strain on my soul, on my emotional, my mental health, and overall well-being. And I realized over the years that in order for me to move forward more healthfully and also to relate to others more healthfully, not only in the queer community, but generally in my life, it was an important part of my growing up and my facing myself and my own decision to live the life that I truly felt in my soul. And so a part of that life moment was having a conversation. And the conversation, for me, what I took from that was something quite transformative in myself. I went in with no expectations and came out feeling not the best, but also it was a moment for me to really reflect on my own strengths in being able to face something like that in front of two of the people that I had seen to be, they were my heroes growing up, and I got to really relate to them as human beings, and to face the pieces of myself that I hadn't wanted to face in front of two of the most important people in my life. And it was difficult, but I got through it. And I did come out on the other side with one of my parents, and we've done a lot of work on our relationship and are continuing to. And I am so grateful that I made the decision to come out to them when I did, and that I continue to live my own life the way that I have, because it has not only transformed me and my life, but my relationship with that parent. And I also want to make a note, in terms of coming out in general, I wouldn't say that there's any one right way to do it. And if you have religious parents and are hesitating on coming out to them or thinking of not coming out to them at all, I totally understand why. And I want to say that I see you, and that is a totally valid response in waiting or not choosing to come out at all and just living your life. I do believe that there is room for growth and people can change, though I didn't go into that conversation trying to change them or looking for any growth whatsoever or expecting any acceptance in return. I went into it really just staying open and looking to share what was on my heart and my soul, and that's what I did. And it wasn't perfect, and it wasn't some beautiful story where I could celebrate and walk down the street, with my parents, but it was my story. And that part of growing into my 30s really also, I would say, changed how I related to many other folks. It impacted so many of my relationships in such a profound way for me on my end. Maybe not something that most people might have seen on the outside, but it really was a turning point outside of just a career and a lot of the other changes that I had gone through. And one of the things that I will also say in terms of coming out to parents and really owning not only who you are, but the life that you're going to live or that you already are living, is it's really a moment for you to own your own power, to really own the being that you are. And this leads me into more of the spiritual realm, because this is also something that I navigated having grown up in a religious home that started in my 20s, where I was kind of unraveling all the religious indoctrination that I had, all of the different social conditioning that I had as a result of that, and just different things that I took on because of that, and really assessing and reflecting what was mine, what were really my thoughts, what were my beliefs over what I was taught and what I was told to believe, and what I, as a kid and as a teenager, chose to continue doing or saying or believing mostly as a way to obtain love or attention or praise or positive feedback from adults around me, because I deeply wanted to be, I deeply wanted to belong. I deeply wanted to feel loved by everyone around me in that community. And I wanted to feel like I fit in, when in reality, somebody like myself was actually meant to stand out. I'm not really fit in with that group, and that's okay. But there were things in my 20s that I really needed to unpack, not only around the religion, but around my idea of what a God was, around my idea of what belief was, around what faith was, and really just around spirituality in general. So moving through that also was a big part of what helped me not only come out to my parents, but also helped me in blazing a new trail for myself spiritually, and really deciding, after some exploration and further teaching from other spiritual folks, from other religions, from just my own studies, my own life experience, I really began to fall into this place of spiritual understanding for myself. I went through many spiritual awakenings. I had many moments where it was, that ego death experience. And I actively sought those things out because I knew there were parts of myself that I wanted to work on and that I felt like needed to grow and to change to become the person that I had always felt myself to be. But also because somewhere deep inside in my soul, it just kept beckoning me forward toward something different. And it really helped me grow in my own spiritual self, I will say, and how I choose to navigate this life that I chose, that I believe I'm inhabiting as a human. And the light that is inside of me is truly what I am. That soul essence is truly what I believe that I am. And over so many years of spiritual exploration, I've really come to this place of peace, of love, and of expressing my joy for all that life has for me and is in this moment and will be. And I really credit the amount of time and energy that I have taken to explore these aspects of myself, but also to stand up for myself, to stand in my own beliefs around many different people, even on this platform. I had many conversations with people around the year 2020 about them coming out spiritually. It can be a big deal if you've grown up in a home that is religious, if you have particularly grown up around folks that have followed some of the major religions like Christianity or Catholicism, because those religions have big backing, right? There's a lot of foundation and support around following a major religion or something that is well organized. It doesn't just have to be those two. And standing apart from that and standing on your own in some ways can feel a bit scary, and it can feel like you're alone in that. And in some ways, I also credit platforms like YouTube for holding space for people like me to have a place to talk and to share not only what I believe, but also my story, so that it's something that we can connect over. Because releasing religion, if it's something that you've grown up in, and then choosing to believe in something else, even if it's nothing, right? It can feel like such a big transition. It can feel like taking a really big step in your life. And that's because in some ways it is. You're choosing and saying that you have something that you believe outside of how you were raised. And you're choosing yourself. You're choosing to believe in your own soul and what is calling to your own heart. And I think there's so much beauty in that. And it's truly an act of self-love in this life. Now, speaking about self-love, we're also going to move into some beginnings and endings around loving relationships. And I say loving relationships because this can encompass any type of relationship where there is love. And I have navigated beginnings and some really painful endings, also some really beautiful endings in relationships, in romance, in friendships, and in familial relationships. So just taking a moment to honor that love in this context is something that exists always and doesn't ever truly end. I believe it is something that can be transformed because love is also what you are. And when I'm talking about these stories, I hope that you can see some of that belief seeping through them. But the first story that I'll start with is that I was married. I was married for over a decade to my high school sweetheart, and we had a really great marriage until it wasn't so great anymore, and we grew apart, and we grew to want different things and to want to do things very differently in our lives. And it took us in different directions. And so as we began to unravel our relationship and separate, I began to realize that truly what I wanted was divorce. And we agreed upon that. And it was something that at the time I believed would be so smooth and easy. We didn't have shared assets or children. And so I thought, gosh, it'll just all go away and we can move on with our lives and it will be so great. And I think I underestimated my own level of love and care, right, that I had for not just that relationship, but the entire life we built around it. And if you have been in a long-term relationship, you know, whatever that means to you, especially if you've been in a relationship for a decade or longer, you know the amount of community, the amount of life you have built around this other person, you have built with this other person. And in going through the process of separation itself, gosh, it was so difficult. And we did marriage counseling. I also had my own counselor or therapist, but we also did marriage counseling, which did help a bit. But ultimately, it wasn't something that could see us through starting again. And we did try to start over, I will say. But, you know, we were young. We were married young, and we were young when we were doing that. And we didn't know what we were doing. We were just doing what we felt called to do, both trying to stay present with what each other needed. And I was doing everything under the sun in my life in general and my career, but also in working on myself and seeing things that I could change about myself to better show up as a partner, as a person. And it just came to a point where it felt like we had lived out the expression of that relationship that we had created together, and it was time to complete it. The divorce process itself took quite a while. We did not choose to use lawyers. We did it online with a website called LegalZoom.com. And I decided to continue living life while that process was going on. And it took about 1.5 years for it to complete. Though I found after everything, I didn't really think at the time before we separated that I needed a divorce. And then when the paperwork was actually being signed, it was this whole moment for me that I felt so much completion and finality, which I personally really needed for my spirit to move on. And for me, particularly signing that document was a very interesting experience. I was in the jungle. It was a stormy, rainy day. And I was on the phone with these notaries witnessing me signing this document electronically. It couldn't have been more of a, movie moment with the storm going on and being in such a beautiful, absolutely beautiful place to have that finalized. And then I could just, turn my phone off and go right back to being in this absolutely gorgeous location, living the life that I wanted to live. So it was a very interesting moment to go through, but also I will speak to post-divorce, because we did stay in communication and we did try to develop a friendship afterward, and even working together in some capacity. We did go through a period where there was no contact for many months, and then we went through a period of kind of going through the relationship and having several conversations, very long-winded conversations where we kind of just shared a lot of what we felt went on in the relationship, which for me were really healing, and I felt were something that we needed to have to start any kind of relationship moving forward. And we did desire to have a friendship, and so having very honest, like radically honest conversations with each other were really important to doing that, and it helped. It was not beautiful at all. It was not pretty. And I would say, you know, our relationship as it transformed also wasn't perfect or pretty. And I'm okay with that. You know, not all relationships are meant to be, you know, sunshine and rainbows, and you can still have love for them and in them. And I am so glad that I chose to do that relationship with that person at that time in my life. And I'm also really glad that I chose to end it and to move on with my life, and that we ended it the way that we did, and that it's over. I will say, in terms of moving through something like that, again, really looking for your sources of support are going to be so incredibly important. Not only in people, but considering therapy is really important. You might consider a guide, like somebody like myself, like a spiritual guide of some sort. I had all sorts. I even had, you know, a personal trainer. I had an acupuncturist, or at one point I was seeing a chiropractor. Being able to move the energies that you might be going through with your body is also really important. And having still a life that you can turn to while you're going through the divorce process and post-divorce, I also highly recommend. You know, I was very active in many things in my life, trying new things, going out, dancing, even just on my own. I spent so much time in the evenings dancing and listening to music in my kitchen, or in the kitchens that I was in where I was staying at the time. I did quite a bit of travel as well. So all these things combined can really help you move through such a big life change, especially if it's like I was saying, a long-term relationship. It matters so much. And also holding space for the amount of people that might come and go through your life as you navigate such a big transition. One of the reasons I held off on even asking for separation or for such radical change in my previous marriage at the time was out of fear of losing not only some of the comforts of the relationship that I had, but also the safety around it, you know, the stability that we had cultivated around it, and particularly all of the other relationships that we had around it. I had no idea what was going to happen once I started moving down that path. And all these years later, reflecting back, especially as I was coming to making this video, I have learned, you know, you will really know who is there for you in your lowest of low moments, in your ugliest of moments, and who is meant to stay with you after these transitions have ended, and when you're moving into a new start. And there is absolutely no way I could have foreseen who would be with me on the other side. And I am so grateful that I still did it, and that I am on the other side of it with who I am with. I also want to touch on grief here, because grief is such a huge piece of why this might take some time for you to move through, and to give yourself no timeline, to not put a time stamp on it to a certain degree on how long it's going to take you to get over this process and the past relationship that you were in. And I say that generally and very liberally on a grand scale in terms of no timeline. There were moments where, I had to show up for certain things in my life. Especially I ended a previous business, that I was in, and I started a new one. So there were things that I actively had to show up for and do in my life that I wanted to do in my life. And so I would set some limits around, okay, I'm going to allow myself to feel, here's my window of feeling on these days or for this amount of time during this month. And not that I would suppress or repress necessarily, but I would, have boundaries within myself around my grieving time so that I could honor it and give it the space that it needed when it needed it, but also honoring that I wanted to show up in my life in certain ways and I wanted to keep certain things moving forward as well, and that my grief couldn't completely take over my life because I also was living a happy life over here and I was also moving forward joyfully over there. So those pieces of my life needed to have just as much attention as the grief did as well. And in terms of other loving relationships, especially friendships, I will say I have learned so much about not only making friends as an adult, but ending friendships as an adult as well, and what friendship really means to me. In my 30s, friendship began to take a different definition for what friendship meant. And I realized that in my 30s. And it took me some time to really come to being able to say that out loud when making new friends and really understanding even how to make new friends from a place of authenticity, but also a place that honored, what friendship really means to me, and seeing how I could meet another person where they were in what friendship meant to them, right? And it's still a learning experience, I will say, but losing friends, especially long-term friends, also comes with a lot of the same things that it does in ending a marriage. I will say that grief is so profound, it's so deep, and it hurts on a number of levels because, the friends that you went through many life stages with already, if it was a long-term friend especially, it really impacts you and your ability to move forward in life in some ways. You got to find different ways of coping. I have often found also that the universe sends me different people at different points in my life. I think when it knows I'm going to need somebody to lean on, or maybe that person needs somebody to lean on and we can be there for each other in the smallest of ways. It doesn't have to be something that is so overt, but also something that can be really beautiful and the spark of something potentially long-term or maybe not. I have had such deep, profound friendship with people for such short periods of time, ones that I thought maybe might last quite a while or even a lifetime, and then, it's like they're just gone, and that's okay. I wish them the best and I send love, and I also know that it was meant to last as long as it was meant to last. But I will say it took me a while to come to that, and it wasn't until in my 30s I really sat with what friendship actually means to me, what it actually looks like to me, and how I want to practice friendship, how I want to show up as a friend, and how I can consistently do that over a period of time. Did I really understand and allow things to just be and allow the friendships to just go as they were meant to go? Though I will say each relationship is different and each one has brought out a different part of me. And so how I've navigated those has been, different depending on the relationship. And I will say, in terms of moving forward in a new relationship, I do think it's important to understand what it is that you're looking for and what friendship really does mean to you. I don't know that people spend as much time thinking about that as they do a romantic partner, but I do find that it is really valuable and more than just things that you have in common, but what do you each stand for? What is it that you're each looking for in friendship, and can you each provide that for each other? And this isn't to say you have to do this with everyone, because some friendships just take off and they're easy and it's great. We all love those ones, but also, some do take work and time and energy. And if you have a whole life, going on, it really will take time to, schedule a hangout, to make time to connect with that friend, to maintain a friendship on whatever level you're looking to maintain it. And in terms of ending friendships, I will also say that one thing I have learned that I find has a profound impact on myself, but also in terms of closure with the relationship, is saying something, is saying that you want to end it, and why. And this doesn't always have to happen, with every friendship that you have. I don't know that it's always necessary, but some of them I have found it is necessary and warrants something to end it with, and to send off with. I have always found that being clear with people adds some bit of, well, especially at the end, closure. So take that for what you will. If that's something that you wish to practice, I would love to know in the comments below if you do, or if you are, and if you have, and how that went for you. Now, in terms of loving familial relationships, I will say these ones can be quite painful to end. There are certain relationships that I do find validity in ending and not continuing, especially if they are abusive relationships, if they are not healthy, whatever term or word you want to use, or if they just don't align with you and your life and where you're going, if they're not supportive relationships. I want to just see you, and I validate you in that and in your decision to do that. Though I also will say to be aware of the amount of grief that you may be experiencing and or unprocessed things within yourself, because as a family member, especially if it's somebody that you grew up in a home with, they ultimately were a mirror to you and a teacher to you in some ways of what was going on, not only in that type of relationship, but also may have set you up for different types of relationships in your adult life. And as I've really navigated starting and ending relationships in family and transforming relationships within a family dynamic in my 30s, amidst all these other transitions that you go through in your 30s, I will say that it takes a toll on the spirit. And it's really something that I believe warrants time to really ponder, time to really sit with, and also time to really live and allow answers to come to you, allow, space for meditation, contemplation, and even if you believe in praying to something or someone, prayer, and asking for help and guidance within your soul and your spirit, and to keep your heart open to the experience either of transforming a relationship and or ending a familial relationship, and the implications that that might have for you moving forward, especially if you're looking to start your own family, and or looking to attend other family events, where you might see this person again. There are so many things to think about if you're looking to end familial relationships. And I had a moment, that moment with my own family coming out to my parents, where I needed to make a hard decision about whether I was going to continue communication. And it it really tore me apart at the time because I had no idea what to do. I was unprepared for that. Nobody told me that that was something that I might want or that I might even consider until I found myself considering it, you know? And I think that also leads me to one last major point about all of this. Any start, any end, any transition you're going through, there is no way to be absolutely prepared for it all. Absolutely no way. This video may help. Others like it might help, you know? Other people you look up to, they may help. Your own intuition, your own inner spiritual guide, that might help. But, you know, it's not ever going to be perfect. And, you know, life has a way of just unfolding in a way that will consistently require you to show up and just be present. And you will know yourself by the way that you choose to respond, by the way that you come out on the other side. And I think truly all starts, all ends, all transitions are really just a part of the story of you, of the love story that you have created in this human life. And I hope that this video has helped in some small way, that at least one piece of my story maybe can give you some solace in your own. And I'd love to hear if you have anything to share in the comments below about pieces of your own new start, pieces of the endings that you've gone through or the transitions, or if you're thinking about starting something new this year, let us know in the comments below. I would love to know. And if you'd like to connect with me any further for private guidance, check the description box below and you will see those links. And I will see you in the next video.